Are you ready, Prabhuji?
All right. I think we're there now. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, sorry if we apologize for this little delay from this end. So I think so we can go ahead now with the class. So Naradena Namaskritam Narachavam Narutama Devi Sarasvati Pyasam Tatu Jayam Utiraye Nasta Praisu Abad Resu Mitya Bhagavatam Sevaya Bhagavati Utama Sloki Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki. Reading from SRIMAD Bhagavatam, 1st Canto, chapter 13, text number 54. We'll read the Sanskrit text. Jita sano jita swasa pratya rita sad indriya Ari bhavanaya dwasta raja satwa tamo maha Jita sano jita swasa pratya rita sad indriya Hari bhavanaya dwasta raja satwa tamo mala Jita sano jita swasa pratya rita sat indriya Auri bhavanaya dwasta raja satwa tamo mala. Word for word translation. Jita asana, one who has controlled the sitting posture. Jita swasa, one who has controlled the birthing process. Pratya rita, turning back. Sat 6. Indriya senses. Ari, the absolute personality of God. Bhavanaya, absorbed in. Dwastaha, conquered. Raja, passion. Sattvaha, goodness. Tama, ignorance. Malaha, contaminations. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, the Bhai Charanara Vindesi Bhakti Vedanta Swami Patita Prabhu Guru. One who has controlled the sitting postures, the yogi asanas, and the breathing process can turn the senses towards the absolute personality of God and thus become immune to the contaminations of the modes of material nature, namely mundane goodness, passion, and ignorance. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The preliminary activities of the way of yoga are asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dhyana, dharana, etc. Maharaj Dhritarashtra was to attain success in those preliminary actions because he was seated in a sanctified place and was concentrating upon the objective, namely the Supreme Personality of God, Hari. Thus, all his senses were being engaged in the service of the Lord. This process directly helps the devotee. To get freedom from the contaminations of the three material modes of nature. Even the highest mode, the material mode of goodness, is also a cause of material bondage. I want to speak of the other qualities, namely passion and ignorance. Passion and ignorance increase the material propensity of anchoring for material enjoyment. Excuse me. And a strong sense of lust provokes the accumulation of wealth and power. One who has conquered these two base mentalities and has raised himself to the platform of goodness, which is full of knowledge and morality, cannot also control the senses, namely the eyes, the tongue, the nose, the ear, and touch. But one who has surrendered himself unto the lotus feet of Lord Hari, as above mentioned, can transcend all influences of the modes of material nature and be filled in the service of the Lord. The Bhakti Yoga process, therefore, directly applies the senses to the loving service of the Lord. This prohibits the performer from engaging in material activities. This process of turning the senses from material attachment to the loving transcendental service of the Lord is called pratyahara. And the very process is called pranayama, ultimately ending in samadhi, or absorption in pleasing the Supreme Lord, Hari, by all means. Umagyanam timirandasya gyanam gyanam chalakaya Sakshu militam jena pasma Shri Gurave Nama Sri Chaitanya Mano Vistam Stapitam Jena Bhutali Swayam Rupam Kadamayam Dadati Swam Pada Antikam E Krishna Karuna Shindu Dina Bandhu Dagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste Tapta Kanchana Gorange Radhe Vindavaneshwari Prishabhanushte Devi Pranamami Nari Priye Mokankaroti Vachalam Pangam Lagayati Girim Yat Kripata Ham Vande Shri Guru Dinatarina Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Guru Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jita Sano Jita Swasa Pratya Rita Sat Indriye Hari Bhavanaya Dwastaha Raja Sattva Tamoma La Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. So let me first offer my respectful obeisances unto all the spiritual masters, starting from the author of the SRIMAD BHAGAVATAM, Srila Vyasadeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all the Vaishnava Acharyas, our senior God brothers and God sisters, all of the devotees on this platform, for their costless mercy giving us this opportunity to render service, which is the ultimate means of liberation from the conditional state of material life. As has become almost a tradition, I've become a recipient of a special mercy. I do not know what kind of past activities I've accumulated that gives me this opportunity to get the mercy of the Vaishnavas. I wasn't supposed to be speaking here today, but somehow or the other, by the mercy of the Vaishnavas, I've been called upon to take this responsibility of this service, because the original speaker for today, His Holiness Bhakti Damoda Swami, has some other engagements, and I've been requested to come and speak on his behalf. So I'm begging for his mercy and the mercy of all of the Vaishnavas that I may speak something that will be beneficial for my purification and for the living pleasure of the Lord and the devotees. So today we are reading from SRIMAD BHAGAVATAM, 1st Canto, chapter 13, text number 54. And this verse is a continuation of the chapter subtitled Distarasta Crit Homes. And from the middle of the chapter, we read how Vidura instructed Dhritarashtra with Gandhari, and Dhritarashtra left the palace, Kuru dynasty, after getting so much of chastisement, spiritual chastisement. And Dhritarashtra left, but then Yudhishthira came out and was lamenting, whereas his Dhritarashtra gone to. And in his lamentation, by the costless mercy of the Lord, the spiritual master appeared. And this time it wasn't just an ordinary spiritual master, it is the transcendental spaceman, the topmost Bhakta. Narada Muni himself, he came, the spiritual spaceman. And he started instructing Maharaj Yudhishthira about the goal of life, where there is never a need to lament, and what should be the duty of a man, one who has taken this material body. So in this particular text, Narada Muni continued his instructions, and he's explaining to Dhritarashtra the position of it's explained to Maharaj Yudhishthira the position of Dhritarashtra. And in this verse, actually 3 points were actually clearly mentioned. Now, the Muni in this text is explaining number one, is explaining the state of somebody or person who is on the path of spiritual life, who has attained the third stage in the process of attaining the ultimate goal of yoga. As we know, yoga means to link, derived from the word yoke, to link. So that process that links this Jiva Atma to the Parama Atma, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is called yoga. And the whole of the process of Vedic teachings centered around one becoming a yogi. Lord Krishna told Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita that in whatever circumstances you should become a yogi. But we know that there are different types of yogis. But in this verse, Narada Muni is talking about one who is following the path of a particular type of yoga system called Ashtanga Yoga, which is the process of training the body. Ashtanga Yoga has 3 parts and 6 limbs, according to the Vedic teachers. But before we go there, in this verse, like I was explaining, Narada Muni is explaining that the position of somebody who is on the path of Ashtanga Yoga. Like I said, there are 6 stages, but in the process of the 6 stages, there is stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The 6th limb, or the 3rd limb, or the 3rd stage of growth or development in the path of yoga practice is what Narada Muni is talking about here. One who has attained that 3rd stage, he explained the symptom of such a person. And what does such a person who have attained that 3rd stage in the progressive stage of going practicing yoga, what does that person do? In other words, it's explaining that in this verse that the Dhrishta is on the path of a particular type of yoga, which is Dhyana Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga, and is establishing that he is presently on the 3rd stage of development, and is explaining that one who has attained that 3rd stage of yoga development, what does that person does? In this same verse, is explaining that. And thirdly, when one achieves that 3rd stage, in other words, at every stage in development of yoga, there are different stages and there are different achievements one can achieve. There are 6 limbs of yoga, particularly, like I've explained, in the part of yoga. But these 6 limbs of yoga actually sometimes is misconstrued to be limited to the part of Ashtanga Yoga, but actually this is actually applicable to all the forms of yogas. But before we go there, one interesting thing that piques my mind first here is that Narada Muni is talking about the process of Ashtanga Yoga. We've read in the Vedic scriptures that there are 4, this material world goes through 4 cyclic rotational stages. Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. Dhritarashtra is in Dwapara Yuga. According to the Vedic understanding, in Satya Yuga, the means of, or the yoga for linking with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This point is interesting, and that's why I'm highlighting this. Because it is said that in the Satya Yuga, in the 1st age, people attain God, or the yoga for the 1st age, for the 4, this number 1 of the 4 cyclic rotational stage of this universe is Ashtanga Yoga, yoga of meditation. Well, it is said that in Treta Yuga, it is sacrifice. In Dwapara Yuga, is deity worship, temple worship. And for this age, is chanting of the holy name. So the question in my mind is that why is Narada Muni talking about the yoga, which is considered to be yoga for the 1st age, Satya Yuga? Because this process of Ashtanga Yoga is a yoga for that age. So why is Narada Muni talking about this? Why is this Dhritarashtra, who is supposed to be engaging in temple worship, which is the prescribed dharma or yoga for the age, practicing Ashtanga yoga. This is an interesting point because in actuality, all forms of yoga actually has all the 6 limbs of yoga system. Whether one is practicing karma yoga, dhyana yoga, or Ashtanga yoga, whether one is practicing jnana yoga, yoga of speculative knowledge, these 6 limbs of yoga is always essential. Even in the process of bhakti, sometimes devotees, sometimes we think, okay, the yoga meditation is for those who are in the age of Satya Yuga. But that is not the truth. And to understand this, let us look at these 6 limbs of yoga first. Then we can at least maybe probably relate them to how it is manifested in all forms of yoga. There are 8 limbs of yoga called, Prabhupada mentioned them in the purport. He mentioned about 6 of them: yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana. But after the 6 Prabhupada mentioned, there is still also dhyana and samadhi, which is the ultimate, as Prabhupada mentioned in the purport, which is the ultimate or the zenith or the highest state of attainment in yoga practice. So when we look at these 8 limbs of yoga, what do they actually mean? Yama. According to the Acharyya's description, yama simply means to restrain a moral discipline or moral vows. And when we look at our bhakti, or the process of devotional service, when one takes to the path of devotional service, no one can practice yoga or bhakti without restraints in the beginning, because in the material life, we are addicted to so many nonsensical things. So we practice yama. We practice restraints. We take to moral disciplines. Wake up early in the morning, take cold bath. These are what is called yama, which the yogi also partake. When we look at the second limb of yoga, which an Ashtanga yoga practice, it is called niyama. And niyama means a positive duty or observance. And when we look at bhakti, when we come to this devotee platform or the association of devotees, the first thing is that we start learning, oh, you've been eating all kinds of nonsensical food. For you to practice bhakti, you have to restrain from eating this, you have to restrict from going to so kind of a place. So yama is there. Then the second limb of yoga, which is niyama, which is a yogi practice, positive duties or observance. And this is the preliminary thing that devotee does in the beginning of the devotional service. You're asked to worship pot and plates. So many of us have these memories when we are bhaktas. It is very prominent for most of us. Yeah, thank you very much, Prabhu, for putting on the screen. It is very prominent that we follow the second one, positive duties of observance. So the temple president says you go and wash pots and plates. In my back days, I remember very well, I became so much attached to washing the toilets that I would hide in the toilet for hours reading SRIMAD BHAGAVATAM. Because I no longer see the toilet as a toilet, but I see it as part of the temple. So when we talk about, because I'm trying to drive our mind towards why Mr. Rastra is practicing the yoga he's practicing. And when we look at the third yoga, limbs of yoga, which is asana, postures. When we come to devotional service, we experience We have even in one of the Srila Prabhupada's famous lectures, the proper japa meditation. Most of us must have heard this. Prabhupada shouted during the japa period, sit properly. Some of us will remember this thing. When the devotee, I think that was in the early days, the devotee sat down, they were chanting, and the devotee was sitting improperly. So Prabhupada said, sit properly. So the sitting posture is not synonymous just only to Ashtanga yogi. And when we talk about the pranayama breathing techniques in Bhakti Yoga, although we are not practicing Ashtanga yoga, but we see in our practice of devotion and service that this also comes into place. Pratyahara, withdrawing the senses. No one can practice bhakti if he does not practice withdrawing the senses from the sense object. Before we join devotional service, we are attracted to going to disco houses. We are attracted to going to parties with friends. But one of the prominent things that happens in our life, even when we have not attained bhakti, is that we're no longer able to go to those places we go to before we join devotional service. So we start withdrawing our senses. So those things which are naturally attracted to us, even when we hear those music played by the kamis, we don't want to hear them. We restrict ourselves from listening to the TV, the one eye tube. Why? Because we want to practice pratyahara. Then dharana, focus and sense concentration. Just a few days ago, Sridhar Prabhu was giving a class and he was talking about how in devotional service, when he joined devotional service, when he want to practice devotional service, and he quoted Prabhupada also on that. We train to focus on looking at the deities. The yogi is trying to focus to see the Paramatma in the heart. But the devotees have to focus the mind on seeing the deities of the Lord. So dharana is inclusive in bhakti. It is inclusive in sacrifice. No one can perform a sacrifice and get the benefit of sacrifice if he does not have focused concentration. Even in material life, no one can achieve anything materially if he has no focus. In our educational, in our business, in our even marriage life. When you go to marriage counselor, they tell you, for you to be able to have a happy married life, you have to focus on your family. Then we talk about dhyana, meditative absorption. In the meditative absorption, we can chant the holy name. In fact, our acharyas, they've given us so much of means of absorption. Our chanting on the mantra beads is a way of drawing our mind into a meditative state. No one can successfully remember Krishna. There is a book, one of the books written by Srila Prabhupada's disciple, Yoga Meditation. I think in the early days also, there's one book, Ancient Medicine for Modern Man, written by Amsterdam Prabhu. Maybe some of us have read that book. And in that book, it's also explained how devotees are the highest meditators. Because you cannot chant. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he trained. No one can actually derive, no one can be said to be chanting the holy name if he is not able to meditate on the holy name of the Lord. The whole process of practice in the course of trying to chant the holy name is to come to the dhyana platform where he meditates. And of course, when one achieves success in such an endeavor, it constantly, and this is exhibited in the state
the gopis of Vrindavan. The gopis of Vrindavan are perfect example of one who has attained samadhi, the highest or the zenith of the limb of yoga. They can no longer, even if when they want to, they can no longer forget the presence of Krishna. So when the Sarastra is being talked to here, when we look at the purport of the verse today, Srila Prabhupada was giving that purport, explaining as if he was talking about, when we look at the purport, Prabhupada was constantly talking about bhakti, devotion service, which is not present in the process of yoga, of dhyana. But what Prabhupada is trying to emphasize here is that all of these processes are established. When we talk about yoga, it does not necessarily mean that one is practicing dhyana. Actually, according to the Vedic scriptures, as stated in the chapter, the conclusion of the chapter of dhyana yoga in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita, when you go to the text, the final verse, where Lord Krishna declared a bhakti yogi as the highest of all of them, where he says that in that verse, Lord Krishna says, Yoginam api sarvesam maga inanta atmanam sadavam bhajate yomaham same yukta tamo mataha. That, and of all yogis, the one with great faith, who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga, and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. And when Krishna gives his opinion, which opinion can be more superior? Because he's the supreme. And whatever Krishna says, there cannot be anything superior to that. So when we're talking about this Rastra here in Dwarapa Yuga, and we're talking about the sixth and the 8 limbs of yoga, it is not to be confused that in Dwarapa Yuga, the Sarastra is engaging in dhyana yoga as it is practiced in Satya Yuga. The Sarastra is engaging in yoga of worship as in Dwarapa Yuga, but because yoga essentially carries, every limb of yoga carries the same discipline. When we look at Yama, it is further explained that when we look at Yama and Niyama, which is what the yogis call positive and negative aspect, because in material life, there's always this balance of positive and negative. Yama actually relates to, it is further divided into 5 limbs. In Yama, or in restraints, there are 5 things that one does in restraining oneself in the part of Yama, or discipline. Put it in a simple language. There are 5 activities one is expected to practice when one is practicing Yama, and it's called ahimsa. Number 1 of it is ahimsa. The first thing one is told as a devotee is that he should practice non-violence. So one cannot restrain himself if he does not practice these 5 limbs of Yama. Which number 1 is ahimsa, non-violence. One has to practice satya, truthfulness. Asteya, one has to be self-control, not to take that which belongs to others. Then the number 4, under the principles of Yama, is described as brahmacharya. When most of us join devotional service, even for one who has taken to married life, is taught the process of abstaining, or what the yogis call proper utilization of energy, or simply put, brahmacharya life. The whole concept of brahmacharya in the process of bhakti is about the same principle that is practiced by a yogi in the form of Yama. And the 5th limb in the under the number 1 limb of yoga, which is One has to develop a lack of greediness. So all of these activities are fully established in what Srila Prabhupada has given us. Sometimes people say that in the process of bhakti or Krishna consciousness given by Srila Prabhupada, not everything has been given. But when we look at it very carefully, the Prabhupada in the purport to the verse, he clearly shows how this process of Krishna consciousness encompasses. And that is why it is said that what one can achieve in Satya Yuga by practicing Ashtanga Yoga, or what one can achieve in Treta Yuga by engaging in sacrifice, or what one can achieve in Dwapara Yuga by temple worship, one can achieve it in Kali Yuga simply through the process of Krishna consciousness, this process of bhakti, which is the culmination of all processes of bhakti or yoga system. So yoga, when we talked about yoga, yoga necessarily does not mean Ashtanga Yoga. Those who do not know what yoga really means ascribe it to some form of bodily exercises. But this is just one limb of the process of yoga. And Prabhupada, in this purport, he elaborately dealt with the 3 points that was raised in the text. Like I said earlier, in the text, Narada Muni is emphasizing that before one can be absorbed in the process of bhakti or devotion to service, not service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one must attain the third stage, or one must have attained the third stage in yoga practice, which is called asana. And there is an elaborate description about asana. But in that, Srila Prabhupada is explaining, one who has attained that place is able, by that attainment, able to engage himself in the senses on the Supreme Personality of God, which is what the Sarastra is doing here. The Sarastra is able, as explained in the purport, is meditating on the Supreme Personality of God. Srila Prabhupada clearly explained that in the purport. That although the Sarastra, in this case, he has left home, is sitting in a favorable environment. In Kali Yuga, we may not have the opportunity to go to the forest, but Srila Prabhupada has created the forest in the temple. So he created the forest all over, not just only in India. He went to the US, he went to all parts of the world, and he created forests in the temples. So the temple serves as the same positive or wonderful environment that is required for one to be able to engage in meditation. And that is why it is mentioned that for one to practice devotional service, whether one is resident in the temple or one is resident in his house as a grihasta, one must make his environment like as Prabhupada has given an example of the temple. One's house must be a temple. Otherwise, yes, it is not that in the beginning of Krishna consciousness, everything was temple-based. But Prabhupada was doing that to show how to create more temples. Although Prabhupada started 108 temples, it has developed into so many thousands of temples today. But when we look at it critically, there are millions, tens of millions of temples all over the world today, because in the millions of devotees who are spread across the globe, you find in their homes Krishna sitting in there, creating that kind of an environment that this Rasta was sitting. And one who was able to attain this level, what happens? The positive thing that happens is that when you have this kind of environment, you are able to do what? To meditate. In one of the trainings I used to do to Kamis, most especially those who work in the financial institution, I have one training material where we discuss about mindsets and skill sets. mindset is simply meaning the combination of whatever one has acquired or learned over the course of his years. But how is that different from skill set? How is that different from skill set? That is different from skill set in the sense that skill set or capacity or what one has learned as a skills in the course of life is also accumulation of knowledge or practice that one has acquired. But there is an interesting analogy that I always give in that respect. Mindset can be described like a kind of an ocean. In mindset and the fish in the ocean is in an analogy is like the fish in an ocean. What I'm trying to say in essence is that in this material world, because Prabhupada was talking about overcoming the three gunas or modes of material nature. In several places in our scriptures, the material world is being described like an ocean. It's like an ocean. And in an ocean, a fish being an habitat of the water can swim very nicely. But with the skills of swimming, if the fish does not have the proper techniques to go down to the base of the water and rise, it will, even while in the ocean, it can die. In other words, even when one learns all of the techniques in the part of bhakti or the process of devotional life or spiritual life, one has to also learn the skills that are required to be able. It's just like an expert swimmer. An expert swimmer can swim very nicely in an ocean. But if he does not have the proper skills, he will die. Because no matter how expert a swimmer is, he cannot swim across the ocean. So in this material world, when one has so much of skills or acquisition of knowledge, if he does not, one has the all of the scriptures, he has the temple, he has every facility. If he does not know the skills to be able to cross over, then his failure is guaranteed. So Prabhupada is explaining the purpose that even though one has learned the art of yoga, one must know, one must come to that point whereby he knows that the focus is to do what? To focus on engage the senses in the meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is only when one, sometimes devotee ask, we've been chanting for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. I remember several years ago, in one lecture, one of our god brother, in the BHAGAVATAM class, I asked him, I was very new in the devotional service then, just barely by a year or so. So I asked him out of eagerness, I said, how long do one have to chant before one attain Godhead? And he laughed sarcastically on the verses. He said, if you chant for 10 years, you are just starting. If you chant consistently for 20 years, then you are on the path of growing successful. Then I was, and he kept on counting 10 years like that. So when he finished, by the time he finished explaining all of that, and I was looking, as at that time I was just in my 30s, and I was looking at him. I said, so there is no end to this. From what you're saying, it's almost impossible to become successful on the path of chanting. Then he answered, he said, but today, this very moment, holy name of the Lord. And I became eager to hear that. I said, how is that? He said, the moment your heart connects with Krishna in chanting, then you have attained Godhead. So in other words, the whole process of yoga should culminate when one is able to meditate on the, or engage all of the senses in meditating on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Whether one is chanting, one is washing clothes, one is cleaning the temple, one's mind must be connected to Krishna. That is the purpose of yoga. So in that text, we're reading today that Ramoni is telling that Dhritarashtra, he has attained this asana stage. And what is expected of him, what he has, having attained that stage, he is able to meditate, to engage his senses, to focus on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And when one is able to focus like that, when the mind is able to focus on the goal of yoga, then something is achieved. And that is the third point mentioned in the text. What is achieved is that the practitioners attain what Prabhupada explained in the purport: transcendence, rising above the three modes of material nature: ignorance, passion, and goodness. As Srila Prabhupada said, even the goodness, which is very attractive to a yogi, is nothing compared to what a devotee attains, because a devotee attains beyond the mode of goodness. And Lord Krishna confirms that when he was talking to Arjuna in the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna was asking, what is the symptom of someone who has attained that transcendence, one who has attained the goal of yoga? So Lord Krishna told Arjuna, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma, na Sushakti, na Kankshati, Sama Saveshu Bhukteshu, Bhaktim Labati Param, 1854. So Lord Krishna told Arjuna, when one attains that transcendental level, the symptoms is that what? He is able to drop all those symptoms of conditional life, which is characterized in the three different colors of goodness, passion, and ignorance. And what happens is that he neither laments nor anchor for anything. He has an equal vision. He sees everybody as equal. Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma. Nasushati, no lament, no anchoring. He sees everyone as equal. And when he has got that, what happens is that then he can render service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And by such rendering of devotional service, what will happen? One comes in face to face with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's why Krishna said in that verse of Bhagavad Gita 6:47, declaring the position of a yogi, a bhakti yogi, that yoginam happy salvation, and of all, salvation means all types of yoginam happy, of all types of yogi practitioner, dhyana yoga, jnana yogi, karma yogi, whatever kind of yoga one practices. Madgatena means abiding, one who is abiding always in me. And there's no one who can do that except the bhakta, the devotee. One who is able to engage, absorb the mind only himself, absorb it only in himself, in full faith. And that is very important. Faith, sort of such a person, he renders loving service to the Supreme Personality of God. And Krishna declared that person is the highest, is the topmost, because he's intimately connected to me. And that is what incense that Narada Muni is explaining to Yudhishthira Maharaj about Dhritarashtra. That Dhritarashtra is engaging in the ultimate yoga. When Prabhupada is translating the purport, Prabhupada nicely explained. When you look at the Prabhupada's translation, One who has controlled the sitting posture, the yogic asana, and the breathing process can turn the senses towards the absolute personality of Godhead. This is the ultimate goal. And such a person, naturally, Prabhupada uses the word, he becomes immune. We have, in the last 2 years, a little bit above, the world has been going through a pandemic. And then, according to the scientists, when one takes a jab, the virus, antivirus for COVID, it becomes immune. Unfortunately, that is not what we're seeing, because they told us that even after taking the jab, you are still likely to get infected by COVID. But this antivirus, this jab that is talked about here, when one takes it, it becomes automatically immune to the influence of the modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. In other words, one who is on the path of bhakti is automatically on the path of transcendence. The material modes of nature cannot touch him. Although material nature and manifested in the goodness, passion, and ignorance is almost impossible to overcome. But one who has been situated on the path of bhakti, this simple process of 9 stages as given by our acharyas, starting from sadhu sangha to prema bhakti. One who is absorbed in this, following the footsteps of Srila Rupa Goswami, he becomes automatically immune to the influence of material nature. He is not able, material activities does not come near in such a person who is engaged in the devotional service. And how does one know one who has done that? Because material activities will never be able to be attracted to such a person. So in this verse, 3 things have been taught: that in devotional service, the acharyas have given 9 stages. One arises from Shraddha and Sadhu Sangha to Shraddha, faith, Bhajana Kriya, Anatta Nivriti, the Nishta, the Rushi. But here, in the terms of yogi practice, it's been said here, that the Muni is explaining, one who has attained this third stage, one who has been able to practice yama niyama appropriately. Such a person who has practiced yama and niyama but must have been able to achieve 10 things, basically, which is encompasses in yama and niyama. Such a person must have developed ahimsa, non-violence. He must have attained satya, truthfulness. He must have attained asteya, or non-stealing. He must have come to the state of brahmacharya, even though he's in grihastha life. He must have learned the act of using sexual energy. He's a brahmachari. As stated in the first verse of that chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita, he knows how to exert the energy given. He is no longer greedy. And because of this yama or discipline, he gets the attainment of niyama. And niyama, one who has achieved the yama, is said to have also developed 5 qualities. He develops cleanliness, is contented, he is no longer burdened by the conversely material desires. He has attained swadhyaya. He knows the self, he knows the body, he knows how to put them into their perspective, what they're meant to be. And he knows by such practice how to engage all of these senses in the right channel. And what is that right channel? Engaging them in the devotional service. And that is what Srila Prabhupada has given to us freely. So all these 8 limbs of bhakti can be easily attained by one who follows these regulative principles of devotional service as given to Srila Prabhupada. Everything from the yama niyama to samadhi, everything is already given in the process of bhakti. So one should not be unnecessarily unduly attracted to some yogic meditation. Sometimes we see people, even when they are on the path of devotions, they get attracted. But all of this is already given in the process of bhakti, if one understands it properly. That is the essence of the purport of Srila Prabhupada. That if one take to the process of Krishna consciousness, all of this is easily attainable. One and towards the end of the purport, in the last 3 sentences of the purport, Srila Prabhupada says that what? That the bhakti yoga process, therefore, directly applies the senses to the loving service of the Lord. That's what Prabhupada said. When one follows this bhakti yoga process, one does not need to worry about meditation, about dhyana, yama, because the process of bhakti automatically, it directly applies the senses to the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And when such activities are done, Prabhupada said in the next sentence, before the last sentence, I'm reading the last 3 sentences. Then he said, this prohibits the performer from engaging in material activities. This process of turning the senses from material attachment to the loving transcendental service of the Lord is called pratyahara, and the very process is called pranayama, ultimately ending in samadhi. Who is that? Somebody is. Ganga Prasad Prabhu. Okay, thank you. So in the last 3 sentences, Prabhupada concluded, he summarizes everything. And I'll take it again. Prabhupada said, in the last 3 sentences, he said what? The first sentence, he said what? Thought to the last sentence, he said, the bhakti yoga process, therefore, directly applies senses to the loving service of the Lord. Then in the next sentence, he said, this prohibits the performer from engaging in material activities. And he concludes in the last sentence that this process of turning the senses from material attachment to the loving transcendental service of the Lord is called pratyahara, and the very process is called pranayama, ultimately ending in samadhi, or absorption in pleasing the Supreme Lord Hari by all means. That is the last 3 sentences. So the whole essence of this text, like I said in the beginning, there are 3 points. And Prabhupada picked these 3 points. After explaining everything, he summarizes in the last 3 sentences how this bhakti yoga encompasses all of the other processes of yoga, and it directly reward a practitioner of yoga or bhakti yoga with all of the results that can be attainable in the 8 limbs of yoga practice. So that is the summary of the whole of the text we're reading today. I will stop here so that we can get interactions from devotees, comments, and contributions. If there are chastisements also, it is good for bhakti. So I'm eagerly waiting for that. But not start this chastisement, because that can be very heavy. I don't know whether I'm going to carry it.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Shri SALIKA Prabhu. We truly and honestly appreciate your service, especially when it comes to sudden stepping in when, of course, we live in this material world and things do happen. When we do not have the speaker speaking, you are readily available to step in. And even when you are not like formally prepared for the class, you're still delivering. So we thank you for that. Now I have a question from some of the true and important statements you made in your presentation. And that is, when one takes to the path of bhakti, then one overcomes the material modes of nature, the modes of ignorance, passion, and goodness. And we are told the characteristics of these modes. So when one becomes a devotee, he expects that he will give up all these modes of material nature. And more especially as a neophyte, when you see a senior devotee who has been practicing and supposedly been able to, supposed to be able to get over the modes of nature, material nature, and you do not see such a devotee, it has led to so many devotees looking. So I would like you to throw a little bit more light as to what it means when it says that Bhakti Yoga dispels the influences of the modes of material nature. What does it mean when the scriptures say that? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Sadi, for this. Is a very beautiful question. And it's a question that should bother anyone's mind, because anyone who wants to be successful on the path must know what it takes. My Guru Maharaj, Shlabhakti Tito Maharaj, dear Gurudev, he used to say that when it comes to this subject matter, he used to say that for one to be successful on any path, he must ask 3 questions to himself or herself and get a perfect answer for that. Unless he gets those answers, there is no hope of his successfulness on that path. And the first thing he will always ask is that, the question he said every seeker must ask is that, what am I looking out for? What do I really want? Because if one goes to a process, just like you rightly said, if he doesn't know what he is looking for, easily can be discouraged, easily can be dissuaded, easily can be confused. It can be easily discouraged. But when one knows what is want and is able to be convinced that that thing exists in that path, which is taken to, whether it is in business, it is in marriage, it is in anything, whatever it is that is one wants to endeavor in, if you have satisfactorily answered that first question, that this is what I'm looking for, and he is convinced that that path or that process is taken to ask that thing, such a person will not be a victim of a confusion on the path, even if there are so many distractions. And he said one should ask the second question to himself, even if he has found that where he is heading towards, ask what he's looking for. Then he should ask himself the second question. The second question he said he should ask is that, what does it take to attain that thing that I'm looking for? I want to buy a car. And Ford cars, ask cars. So what I'm looking for is a car. And Ford Motors as the kind of car I'm looking for. I'm convinced, I've seen that Ford Motors as the car I'm looking for. So there is no confusion about that. Even if somebody comes and say, no, go to Ayaba Motors or some other name Motor, I said, no, I'm convinced what I'm looking for is here in Ford Motors. So no dissuasion. Then the next question is that, what does it take to buy that car? Because if I'm not careful, I will go into that place and I won't come alive. Or if I come alive, I may come with a broken limbs. Because if I don't have what it takes and I want to take that, the owner of Ford Motors may not be very kind person. And I may come out a broken-handed, broken leg person. Because by the time they descend on me trying to take their vehicle without having what it takes, I may not be finding it funny. So when one takes to a particular process of achieving a focus he has convinced himself about, he must then ask, what does it really take to achieve that focus goal? And when one answers that professionally, convincingly, with faith that, yes, this is actually what it takes. I need a Ford car. Ford Motors has that car, and it takes £2,000 or $2,000 or $10,000 to buy it, and I have $10,000 in my pocket. Then I can walk into Ford Motors and say, I want this car. And they said, okay, for you to get this car, this is what it is, give it to me. And I'm able to provide it. I will smilingly, with hand waving, with a lot of respect, I'll walk out of that place with that car. In the same way, if one wants to come to the path of bhakti,
If what one is looking for is Krishna, then the path of bhakti is the right place for him, because bhakti affords Krishna. That is what Krishna told Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. Towards the end of Bhagavad Gita, I said, Bhakti mam abhijananti yavan yashasmi tatuta tato tatua to gyata ishatitad anantaram. If Krishna is what you are wanting, you want to get, Krishna says, by this bhakti, come with bhakti, you will get me. So if one wants to get Krishna, if the goal is to get Krishna, if the goal is not to become a temple president, if the goal is not to become a sannyasi, if the goal is not to become an initiating guru, if the goal is not to become a celebrity, then when one comes into the path or environment of bhakti, he knows that he has to develop bhakti. And if he has developed bhakti, he will see Krishna. So there cannot be dissuaded situation in his life. But if he is looking for something else, and he comes into the environment of bhakti, if he is fortunate, if he has a proper attitude and proper character, he may get bhakti. And before going further, let me not forget the third question the Guru Maharaj said you should ask is that, has anybody achieved this? Because the fourth car I'm looking for maybe 10,000 pounds, and nobody has ever been able to achieve that. Srila Prabhupada used to say that we should ascribe for a rhinoceros. And then if one is able to achieve killing a rhinoceros, then they said, oh, nobody has done this, but he is great. He achieved it. And if you don't get it, then it's still, he's a great man. He actually made an attempt. So, but then, has anybody done this before? If nobody has done it before, because there is in the material world, there is nothing new. Even in material life, he said, life after life, life goes on. There is nothing new in this material world. The world is a cycle. And we used to say, it has no beginning, it has no end. Because if the material world itself has a beginning and an end, then Krishna must be having a beginning, must be having an end. So material nature, being energies of Krishna, has no beginning point. No one can calculate the beginning point of the material nature because it's part of Krishna. When one wants to trace the beginning of it, yes, we can calculate based on, okay, at some point in time, material nature manifested from the body of Krishna, but the beginning of material nature, we cannot explain it. We have understood that material nature is the one of the energies of Krishna, but its origin we cannot trace because it's part of Krishna. So, but then becoming a bhakta or a devotee, we can tell that, oh, somebody in a conditioned life, we can see in our recent past, Srila Prabhupada, Srila Krishnapad, many of the gurus, and many of these students, they've taken to this path. We've seen in exemplary life, they've exhibited the quality of a devotee. So it is possible. So if one is able to answer these four questions, the question that is raised, whether one sees somebody being in devotional service for 10 years, for 20 years, and getting discouraged will not happen, because that is not his vision, that is not his focus. He's not coming because he wants to measure his success by somebody else. His barometer for measuring success is what? Is bhakti in itself. So he looks out for bhakti. And if that is what he's looking for, when somebody is in bhakti, he can tell, oh, this person is in bhakti. If he's not in bhakti, he can tell, oh, this person is not in bhakti, but that will not make him get discouraged. And when we say that bhakti, in summary, when one gets into bhakti, automatically it rises above the most of material nature. The simple analogy we can give is that, like our chariots have given, a man who is eating doesn't need to be told you are belly full, you are satisfied. He knows that he's satisfied because he's eating. So if somebody is engaging in process of bhakti and is getting dissatisfied, he should ask the question, am I actually practicing bhakti? And if I'm practicing bhakti, am I practicing bhakti as it is given by the acharyas, Srila Rupa Goswami were called Rupanugas. So in other words, am I doing my bhakti as Srila Rupa Goswami did, as Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur did, as Srila Prabhupada did? That person must be able to answer himself. So, but there is no excuse for someone to say, oh, my temple president has been in devotional service 30 years before me, and he's not able, he's still having the influence of most of materialism manifesting himself. Then I'm confused. Then one shouldn't be. That means that person himself also has not come into bhakti. If he comes into bhakti, he will see bhakti, and bhakti is Krishna. He will never get discouraged on the part of devotional service. And by such bhakti, the material modes of nature will disappear in his life.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Prabhuji. Thank you for the elaborate answer to my question. We have Shivanath Prabhu's hand. Prabhu, we cannot see your face. We can see Krishna's face, which is beautiful. I would have loved to see your face also. You may unmute and ask your question, Shivanath.
Thank you. Hare Krishna, Salika Prabhu, please accept my obeisance. Thank you for the wonderful class.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji.
Very, very inspiring. So much enthusiasm is put to it. Very sweet.
Thank you very much.
Prabhu, you cite, there was a 3 or 4 points you cite that has in connection with Bhakti Tita Swami.
Yes, 3 questions.
There are 3 questions. You see, that questions I have had different version of it. So I wanted to know which book of Bhakti Tita Swami is that particular 3 question coming from?
I will have to be specific. I don't want to speculate, but I know I've had it directly from his mouth in several lectures, and I know it's one of his leadership. That is leadership book. I think it's in the leadership, but I'm not too sure. He quoted in several books, not just in one book. I think it's in Spiritual Warrior 2 also, but I don't want to speculate. But I can check it out and share it with you afterwards. But okay. I've directly had it from his mouth several times in lectures.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Tribhunath. I don't recall which specific book either, but I know he's said that many times, like Salika just said. But the Sri Upanishad is helping to answer. She's saying it's from leadership.
Yes, I know in leadership 1 or 2, I'm not sure, but I know.
Yeah, leadership speaks on the subject. Well, Mother Upanishad is here. Our big sister. She's having a question in the chat room. It says, Hare Krishna Prabhu Dandava Pranam. Bow down to your lotus feet. Praying to surrender this devotional process. Thank you. Does this process require lifetimes? In other words, practicing devotional service and obtaining success, does it require lifetimes or just one time? Avoidance of interaction with mature nature is hopeless. How can we provide help to the givers without entertaining Krishna's external energy? In other words, how do we engage people in devotional service when they are very hopeless trying to find meaning to life? They're doing devotional service. How do we help them to rise above the influences of the external energy of the world?
Thank you very much, Mataji. I'm very grateful for your question. It's a very inspiring question. And I will try to answer it in the best way my realization could cover. The first thing is, as our actually, all of this is just to remind ourselves about what the acharyas have said, because these questions are questions that have been asked by sages several different times. And in recent times also, devotees have asked this question, and our spiritual masters have all answered these questions. So when talking about how long does it take to become, to attain the goal of bhakti,
Does it take one life? Does it take 2 lifetimes? Does it take many lifetimes? The story of the Brahmana and the cobbler comes to mind. The cobbler, Narada Muni was on his trip to go to Vaikuntha to meet Lord Vishnu. And on his way, he met a cobbler, and the cobbler asked, "Oh, you are going to Bhagavan, Lord Vishnu. Please, could you ask him, if you get there, how many lifetimes do I have left for me to become liberated and get out of this material world?" And the Brahmana also asked the same question in his way as he met the Brahmana, and the Brahmana asked the same question. And another Muni, according to the story given by the Charyas, he went, met Lord Vishnu, and when Lord Vishnu, he asked the question, Lord Vishnu told him, the cobbler, after this very lifetimes, as is this very lifetime he's living in as a cobbler, he's not a Brahmana, he's not a sannyasi, he's not a guru. He said, as a cobbler, after this very lifetime, he's coming back home, back to my abode. And he said, okay, then what about the Brahmana? He said, for the Brahmana, you see, have a whole long years of time to stay in the material world. And towards the end of the story, it is explained that when Narada Muni came, he told the Brahmana, he met the Brahmana first, and the Brahmana said, no, this is not true. I'm not believing you went to Lord Vishnu. If you have gone to him, he must have told you how powerful Brahmana I am, how I'm practicing sadhana, how I'm doing this. And he went to the cobbler. And when he got to the cobbler, he told the cobbler, Jai Sri Krishna. And the cobbler was wondering. He was wondering. Namda himself became bewildered. What are you saying? He said, do you believe what I'm saying? He said, how can I not believe? He said, I'm sitting under a banyan tree. If my Lord can put this big, gigantic banyan tree in a very tiny seed like this, how is it difficult for him to pass the camel, the elephant, through the eye of a needle? It's not something very wonderful for him. This is the way of the Lord. But what is he emphasizing? This story is telling us about one thing very important. And I think I was emphasizing that when I was quoting that verse, chapter 6, text number 47, where Krishna is glorifying Bhakti as the highest of Bhakti. And that he uses the word there, Stradavan, in full faith. In full faith. So, to directly answer your question, Mataji, our attainment of Krishna's, or the goal of Bhakti, is dependent on our faith in Krishna. If our faith is very strong, we will definitely embrace the process of devotional service without reservation. And if we embrace Bhakti in such a manner, ultimately, in this very lifetime, we'll go back to Godhead. That is what Krishna has promised. But to the degree we do not have the faith, in full faith in Krishna, to that degree, we will spend so many lifetimes in this life. So in essence, our stay in this life is dependent on how much faith we have in Krishna consciousness, and the process of Krishna consciousness. And that answers the second question also, that how can we encourage those who are neophytes like us to be able to strive towards achieving the task of rising above the three modes of material nature? But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has made that very easy. Arainam eva kevalam, kalau nasti eva gati anyata. That by this chanting of this name of Krishna, Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, in one of his he explained very nicely how just this name of Krishna, the word Krishna, so powerful that just by chanting it, all impurities disappear, because Krishna is like the sun, and all the impurities of this material world embedded in the three modes of material nature are like this darkness of the night.
And when the sun rays or the sunlight of Krishna's name manifests in the heart of the living entity, the darkness of this ignorance of mode of passion, ignorance and goodness immediately is dissipated. So the way any sadhaka can easily attain this seemingly unattainable is to get attracted in faith to the chanting of this holy name. In devotional service, beauty of devotional service is that devotional service does not say, try to abstain. There is nothing like abstaining in devotional service. Just become attached to Krishna. And we are automatically being attached to Krishna. All the other things that are unwanted is dissipated. And that is why it is said that there are only 2 rules in Krishna consciousness, in Vedic scriptures, in the whole of the spiritual knowledge is condensed in 2 instructions. Attached to Krishna, detachment from Maya. So I don't know whether I answered the question, Mataji.
Jai Prabhu, Hare Krishna, Hari Hari Bol.
Hare
Thank you
Krishna.
so very
Hare-
much.
Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you for sharing that. And you know, Prabhu, it's pretty hard. It's really hard, this material energy. And I'm
Yeah.
speaking in relationship to everyone, people, family, friends, job, you know. Sometimes you just want to toss them to the curb, okay? And just, you know, really, you want to just throw them away. I don't even want to know anybody anymore. You know what I'm saying? Because you're interfering with my devotion with Krishna, but the Lord's very merciful. You know, he allows you to be able to interact with people just so you can help them become aware of Krishna. I think I'm taking it that way now, you know? So when you get sick and go to the emergency room, you get the opportunity, instead of being sick, you can share Krishna with them, you know? I think that's the point. I think that's how we get that devotion, and we get that mercy and that faith, you know, that faith. So when we're so caught up into I, me, and mine, you know, it kind of distracts you from what the goal is, right? You know, it just,
Exactly.
and that wonderful story you just told about the cobbler, Pram Govinda just told us a similar story to another man and his family, and his wife was getting married, or his daughter was getting married, and it was time for him to leave, okay? And he didn't want to leave just now, and he asked Narada Muni, could he just stay till the baby was being born? That's what was happening. So when the baby was being born, he said, can I stay a little bit longer? I can see the baby, see my grandson, you know? And Narada Muni said, okay, after you see your grandson, to make a long story short, sure, I'll come back and get you. After the baby was born, Narada Muni came back to get him, and then he wanted to see him get married, grow up, you know? He kept on putting it off, you know what I mean? And Narada Muni kept on coming back and saying, well, you said you're ready to go, you know? But that's the material energy, you know, it keeps on attracting you. You have your children, you know what I mean? They just keep you engaged in them all the time. Don't you just get sick and tired of it? So how do you get unattached to your children? You know, it's amazing. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so very much. Hari Bol.
Thank you.
Thank you for your wonderful service. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Mataji, for this
Thank you
wonderful
very much.
sharing. And that story Mother just shared also actually is an interesting one, and it shows how Maya can be so attractive that even when we're looking at Krishna, we still get distracted by that. We just want to, we still want to look at it. So, but then,
And I think Mitravinda just said something that's really sweet too, because she's a loving mom. She just quoted something. Can you want to repeat that, Prabhu? What she said?
Let me read what Mitravinda said. It says, Prabhu, your words are very clear, compassionate from the spiritual perspective, and insightful. Thank you very much for sharing in such an inspiring way.
Thank you very much.
Hari Bol, Hare Krishna.
The children are service to Krishna. Yes. Thank you, Shri Salika Prabhu, and thank you, Shri Ishapanishadi Devi. I think part of the questions that Ishapanishad was asking Somebody had asked a similar question to Srila Prabhupada in Australia, Melbourne. And Srila Prabhupada answered. I'm sure lots of us have watched that short clip. And if you wouldn't mind, I will share the clip here, which is very interesting because it's both immediate and at the same time it's a lifetime after lifetime process. Okay, so let's listen here.
Someone who is not afraid to die and says that he's not suffering.
He's a madman. That's all. Who is caring for madman's work?
It's very easy to convince some people that they're not their bodies, but it's not very easy to convince them that they're not their mind. There's some way we could...
But that will take time. How can we expect? Then 1 minute everyone will understand everything. It requires education, time. If he is prepared to give the time, then he will understand. Not that within 5 minutes, 10 minutes he will understand the whole thing. That's not possible. He is a diseased man. He requires treatment, medicine, and diet. In this way he will understand. A diseased man, if he doesn't care for medicine, diet, then he'll suffer. That's all. Yes? Anyone? No?
Through being here lifetime after lifetime performing impulse activities, or does it mean that we have to be here lifetime after lifetime performing pious activities to balance our simple reactions?
We have been here for many lifetimes performing sinful activities. So is it possible to counteract all those sinful activities in one lifetime, or does it require many
1 minute. That is Krishna consciousness. 1 minute. You are not reading Bhagavad Gita? What Krishna says? Sarva dharman parityajya mam ekang saranang braja aham ta sarva papebhya mokshayami. You surrender unto me, give up your all business. I will give you relief from all sinful reaction. Immediate.
Immediately.
It requires 1 minute. My dear Krishna, I was forgotten, now I understand, I fully surrender unto you. Then you become immediately free from all sin. Without any...
Hare Krishna. So that's our Jagat Krishna Prabhupada. He says, it requires time. You don't expect to understand everything in 5 minutes, 10 minutes. But when it comes to realizing Krishna, it's just 1 minute. 1 minute. So both things are there. And we can see the seriousness in Srila Prabhupada's face when he said 1 minute. Are you not reading Bhagavad Gita? You know?
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that clip. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Hare Krishna. So anyone else?
Yes, Mother.
Mother Shrisha Parishad, you have something to say?
No, Prabhu. I just wanted to say one more thing. I see Govinda there. I don't get a chance to see these wonderful devotees all the time, because I want to shout out at Govinda.
Okay, yeah.
Hare Krishna. And to your family, Prabhu, give them hugs and kisses for me. Haribol.
Haribol, Hare Krishna, Mata,
Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol,
Oh,
Hari
glory.
Chakra is on, Haribol, Hare Krishna to everyone, And
Hare
who else did I
Krishna,
miss? I
Hare
missed
Bo, Hare
someone.
Bo, Hare
I'm
Bo, Hare
sorry,
Bo, Hare
Salika.
Bo.
I just wanted to say hi to everyone. Hare Bo, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Good to see you.
Jai Prabhu, it's my pleasure.
Hare Krishna.
Jai. Mercy.
So anyone else with anything to say? Hare Krishna, Prabhu, please unmute and you go ahead.
Hare Krishna, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
We can hear you, Prabhu.
Yeah. My question is, I'm sorry I was not able to come to the class early, but when I came, I heard a few things, and then the one statement, Salika was trying to make a comparison, and he cited an example of humility, using the coronavirus vaccine, for example.
Can you please lower the sound coming from the background? Share the microphone, I think from your radio or something.
Yeah. Is it okay now?
Yeah.
Okay. The example he was citing.
Okay.
And I want him to throw a little bit light on it. Because what I know is that even materially or spiritually, once you get materially or spiritually, once you get something, when we say you get immunized, it doesn't mean that, like if you are immunized spiritually, it doesn't mean that Maya cannot come to you. But I'm just saying about my understanding. If I'm wrong, then I need correction and I need some explanation. That if they talk about immunity, then it means that even though Maya will come, but because you are immunized by your spiritual standing, you will not fall a victim to it. You will not fall a victim. So similar, like the coronavirus example, he said that even though you might get a vaccine, but that doesn't mean that you cannot be attacked by the virus. You can be attacked by the virus. You can get sick, all right. But because you are immune, you are immunized towards it, the immunization will give you some sort of protection. So I want him to throw a little bit light about the spiritual aspect of it. That does it mean that when you say you are immunized, Maya is completely out of your way, it can never come close to you? Or Maya can come, but somehow or the other, because you are properly situated, then you can deal with it. Because Krishna says that when Maya comes, then the ocean of material misery will become like what we say,
A footprint.
water in the footprint of a cow that you can cross over it. So I want some little bit of clarification on that point. That if you get into the part of the devotional service, does that mean Maya cannot even come close to you? Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Hare Krishna Prabhu, for these points raised. Actually, the point in question is actually from the text of today's class itself. And it's the statement from Narad Muni himself. And if we read that, what Narad Muni said that one who has controlled the sitting postures, the yogi asanas, and the breathing process, such a person can turn the senses towards the absolute personality of Godhead. And when that is done, he said, thus he becomes immune to the contaminations of the most of material nature. And then when we look at the word immunity in dictionary, the dictionary definition of immunity says that Immunity can be defined as a complex biological system endowed with the capacity to recognize and tolerate whatever belongs to itself, and to recognize and reject what is foreign, non-self. It has the capacity to reject what is foreign. When you see the word used by Narada Muni in that text, he said one becomes immune to contaminations of the most of material nature. Now, let me go into your question, Prabhu. The question now is that if one takes to the part of bhakti, is he immune to the influence of the contaminations of material modes of nature? It depends. Taking to the process of devotional service does not automatically guarantees you immunity. You have to practice devotional service. When you look at the answer of Srila Prabhupada in the clip Prabhu just said now, Prabhupada quoted a very, very important verse. Sarva dharma parityajya mam ekam saranam raja aham tvam abedyo mosyami syami masucha. It says when one surrender, it does not say when one takes to the process of surrender. It said when one surrender. And in another verse in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna told Arjuna how to overcome. He said, Devi Esa Gunamai Mamaya Durataya Mam Ibaye Prapra Diante Mayam Etam Tarantite. That material nature is very complex, almost impossible to overcome it. But the moment one surrenders to me, the same word is used there. He rises above it immediately. It's never overcome by material nature any longer. So when we are saying immunity, I'm emphasizing the immunity that in material nature, and using the example of COVID-19, with the utmost of the best of care after taking the COVID-19 vaccine, you are still susceptible. We have seen those who have taken the vaccine when they were not even affected by COVID-19. They became COVID-19 positive after they have taken the vaccine. But this, I'm saying that this is unlike the immunity that is given by the surrender to Krishna or taking Krishna consciousness. When one surrenders to Krishna, it's different from when one is on the path of surrender. When one is on the path of surrender in the aspiring level stage, or what we call the beginning stage of devotional service, one is still susceptible because it's not fully immune to the influence of the three modes of material nature. And that process in the 1466 of Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna told Arjuna that process. He said, Mamcha yo vyabhicharena bhakti yojina sevati sa guna samadhyata brahma bhuyaya kapati. By regularly engaging in the process of devotional service, without fail, Krishna uses the word, without fail. That is, one has to practice the process of devotional service without fail. And when one attains the platform, the point of surrender, just like Narada Muni is saying in this particular text, he said when one attains the particular stage, and that's why I actually break the text into three. So Narada Muni is saying that when one attains the particular stage, then he said, what happens when we attain that stage? What happens is that all of the senses will be able to do what? Surrender to what? To focusing on Krishna. And when that meditation on Krishna happens, it is magnetic, it is automatic, it is natural. The moment the mind connects with Krishna, it gets captured. Just like a metal gets close to a magnet, it captures it and holds it onto it. So when one focuses, when one meditates on Krishna, when one is able to absorb all of the senses, the tongue, the eyes, the mind, everything in Krishna, one becomes like, one attains the position like
that of the gopis. Even when you want to get out, you're not able to because you're absorbed. And that is why Krishna says that in the Bhagavad Gita also, that when one attains this stage, it never comes back. There is no possibility because one who has attained Krishna, even while in this material body, it can never come back. So in our 9 processes of devotional attainment, one from the stages of Sadhu Sangha, Shraddha, Bhajana Kriya, Nishta, Rushi, Ashakti, once it gets to Bhava, is immune. And from there, it enters to Prema. It can never fall down. But at the preliminary stage of Bhava, one may still fall down, like the case of Bharat. But when you enter into Prema Bhakti, you can never fall down. And that state of Bhakti is what is said to be what? A total absorption of all of the senses in Krishna consciousness. When one attains that, it becomes immunized. It becomes immunized. And when it's immunized, no infections can affect him again. And that is what Krishna has promised. Because if one has to get to Krishna after all of the struggle that it takes to overcome material nature, and it still becomes susceptible to the virus of the three modes of material nature, then it is not worth it. But when one attains that, Krishna promises, when you attain that state, when you completely attain samadhi, and Prabhupada emphasized that in the purport, when you attain samadhi, no coming back, because when you get there, it's like magnet. You get captured in that platform. There is no coming back to this platform. Krishna protects you at that point. You no longer have to protect yourself. Krishna automatically protects you. That is a guarantee of bhakti. And it's so sweet. I don't know whether I answered the question, Prabhuji.
Yeah. I appreciate the answer you gave. But I guess maybe my question, I might not have put in it properly. What I was asking is that if you are on that highest platform where you are completely immunized, does that mean Maya cannot come to you? Let me bring it down. Like Haridas Thakur. We know Haridas Thakur was very elevated, chanting all these holy names of the Lord, properly situated. Yet Maya Devi went to him. But because he was properly situated, Maya's influence couldn't even touch him.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
My question is, if you are even situated on the highest platform, does that mean Maya cannot approach you at all? Or Maya can come, but because you are properly situated, then you will not be affected by Maya's influence?
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. I understand now. So what you're saying, we're saying the same thing in this sense. So when one attains that stage, Maya does not even become a threat any longer. It becomes a servant. It becomes a tool to actually glorify your position as a bhakta. Maya comes to glorify you. Maya comes to caution us, control us, caution us when we are not attained that stage. But when we attain that stage, Maya becomes a servant. Just like the example you gave, Maya Devi, when she came, her purpose was just, the whole of whatever engagement she did was to glorify Haridas Thakur. So yes, Maya will come there because Maya is actually not a strange thing. That's why Krishna said, Devi Yesad Gunamayi is my divine energy. So there is never a time Maya will go away. Maya is always going to be there because it's Krishna's energy. There is no time that will be killed. Maya is always going to be existing. But the only thing is that it will no longer pose a threat. Rather, it will become a support, assistant in our endeavor to please Krishna. Thank you very much for clarifying the point.
Thank you, Salika Prabhu, and thank you, Japa Prabhu. SRIMAD Prabhu also commented in the chat room, and he was also referring to Gita 14:26, Brahma Kalpate, which you've addressed. So thank you. Govinda Prabhu, you have something to say? Please go ahead. Probably you'll be the last one, except SRIMAD Prabhu has something to say. Go ahead, Prabhu. Govinda Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Your voice is quite distant. Can you get closer to your mic?
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay, better now.
Yeah.
Yeah, Salika Prabhu. Your answers to Hari Chakra Prabhu's question is generating other questions also.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, like Srila Prabhupada just said, it takes 1 minute. 1 minute to become fully Krishna conscious. 1 minute to burn off all one's karma.
Say a command.
And so your answers to this question also explains that when one attains to that highest platform of bhakti, which is a prem, Maya becomes servant to such a person. And otherwise, he can never be touched by Maya. And you were using Haridas Thakur as an example. When Maya Devi approached him, we all know the result was that Maya Devi became a devotee. And he took Haridas Thakur as his spiritual master. So my question is, when one attains to that platform of bhakti, he's fully Krishna conscious. Otherwise, he automatically has all his spiritual consciousness awakened. And so he's fully connected. Now, why are we here in the material world? And how did we get here? Does the people in the spiritual world, the kingdom of God? Thank you. Is that all you need? Yes. Thank you. Sorry. As the people in the spiritual world obtain this perfection of pure love of God, because originally you were all there, and if over there we had this deep Krishna consciousness, and are you saying that? I heard you also saying that when we go back there, we never return back here again. You quoted Krishna. And those there are pure, fully Krishna conscious. How did they get here? How did we get here? And now you say when we go there, or when we are fully Krishna conscious, there will be no question of Maya again. So how did we end up here? And what is the guarantee that when we go there, we can never be influenced by Maya again over there?
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Yeah, thank you very much, Govinda Prabhu, for that beautiful question. I'm trying to take us to, this is a very question that has been asked. This question is asked several times. And when we talk about how did you come to this?
Salika Prabhu, hold on for a second.
Okay.
A few minutes ago, you quoted Srila Prabhupada saying that in one of his Japa tapes, he ordered, sit properly, right? When you were describing it, the 8 limbs of Krishna. Now, I'm humbly requesting you to sit properly because we can hardly see your face.
Sorry.
Okay, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Sorry, I was trying to bring out a verse to answer Prabhu's question. That was why I was like, thank you very much for that. So the question of How did we get into this situation in the first place? And what is the guarantee that when we go back, we will not come back here again? There's a beautiful verse that I want to quote. I'm just trying to open. I don't know the verse off head. It's a popular verse. I often relate to this verse. Just a second. I think I'll get it now. Just a second. I just want to quote that verse. It naturally answers the, I think it should be Bhagavad Gita 7:27. Let me see. It's just, I'm right. It's Bhagavad Gita chapter 7:27. And I'll read that verse before I answer.
Space.
It says, Ishadwisha samutena dvantva muena bharata sarvabhutana saamohan sarge yanti parantapa. O sign of Bharata, O conqueror of the foe, all living entities are born into delusion, bewildered by dualities arising from desire and hate. Ishadwisha, desire and hate. The living entity, being part and parcel of Krishna, has a minute independence. And he has, part of that independence is that he has the free will to desire, to choose what he wants. And that is what is mentioned here. Ichadwisha. He wants to desire something. And if Krishna does not allow, then he will not be all-loving Father, Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it is the desire of the living entity that brought the living entity back into material world. Nothing other than that. But then the question is that, how is it possible that when we become pure devotee, we go back there, we will not come back here? Let us look at it. Let us look at the example of a baby who wants to touch the light. And the father is stopping the baby. Don't touch the light. The baby wants to touch it. And when the father looked at him, after so long a caution, he said, okay, go ahead and touch the light. And the baby touches the light and it gets burnt. Even when the father tells him to go and touch the fire the next time, he will not touch it. Material example. So the fact is that after going through the experiences of life after life in the material nature, the living entity becomes wise. And what the materialist would call experience, it becomes experienced. And because of his experience, he will not repeat the old mistakes. Because now he knows. Out of minuteness, the living entity desires. And somebody gave an example sometimes back. In the house, the father knows that there is a necessity for the toilet. And he makes available the toilet. And the child sees the toilet WC. And he says, oh, that WC, the water there is very clean. It's like the fridge. They have the same color, white color. Why can't I just take the water from that WC? Why take the one from the fridge? I like that one. And the father said, no, that kind of water is different. You don't take it. And he said, no, I want to take that water in that WC. The father said, okay, go ahead. And he drinks that and he falls sick. If he comes back from the sick bed, even if he is asked to go there, he will never go back there. So the guarantee is that apart from the fact that Krishna never said what will not happen, he said to Arjuna, he said, sometimes I will say and I will change because I'm Krishna, I can do anything. He said, but declare Arjuna boldly, my devotee will never be vanquished. So therefore, when we talk about the living entity attaining the Godhead,
apart from the fact that Krishna has promised it, because the living entity, after going through the rigorous pain of material existence, will never desire that kind of a desire again. And we have it experienced in our own lives. When sometimes we desire something, and that thing turns out to be something unpalatable. Nobody needs to tell us not to go there again. Even if we want to make mistake, even if we are still prone to making mistake, we will not make that particular kind of a mistake again, because we are now experienced that that particular thing is a mistake. When we're doing them, even though somebody is telling us it's wrong, we may not believe it, but because we've experienced, we will not do those mistakes again. So both materially and spiritually, Krishna has said, and if Krishna promises, it comes to pass, because Krishna never say what will not come to pass. I don't know whether I answered the question, Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhu, very, very nice.
Okay.
You helped me in one area, but there's other area too.
Okay.
Now we can see that from the help of this technology, one can sit in his room and view the whole world, like Russia and Ukraine war. One can just sit down through the help of satellites and see how people are suffering and everything going on there. And so now, if you ask me and you, if there's a way you can go to Ukraine, I don't think me and you will say we are going to go there.
Of course.
Because we all know the danger there. So this is a material machine that people are touching the spiritual energy and translating into material counterpart to be able to raise this kind of machines that can view the whole world. Are you saying that these living entities in the spiritual world are not that realized to see what is going on down here in the material world, the suffering that people are going through, and you still desire to come here?
Thank you very much, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, excuse me. Before you attempt to answer this question, this topic, it's very, very detailed, and it's a very deep philosophical topic that we cannot deal with it sufficiently this time. Of course, it's been already more than two hours since we did. And so what we think we're going to be doing is we're going to actually create a special occasion for this particular topic. And we're going to have a philosophical discussion on this topic about the originality of the jiva, whether the jiva fell from the spiritual sky or came from somewhere else. But it's not going to be able to be dealt with at this particular time. That's just my humble question.
Okay, given the Prabhu, so until then, when we have that opportunity, we go
Yeah,
into this actually very topic.
We're going to create that, and then we'll have pros and cons. I mean, you don't necessarily have to be a pro or have to be a con, but you choose where you want to belong to, and you do your scriptural research. You do your scriptural research and defend your stance.
Prabhu, can I just talk out into that question that you just said about, pros and cons?
Yeah.
My understanding that when you come to the level of pure devotee,
yeah,
you don't care where you're at. You know what I mean? Yeah. you can be in hell, like the gopis. They don't care where they go. You know what I mean? Yeah. That pastime about when the gopis, when Krishna had a headache or something, and he only wanted the dust of the feet of his pure devotee. Yeah. And when they went to act the dust of their feet, the Brahmin said, "I'm not going to give him the dust of my feet. That'll kill me." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then when he went to the gopis, they were just, they couldn't get enough dust. You know what I mean? They didn't care where they were going to go. You know, they just wanted to please Krishna. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
And that's the move that we're trying to get to, I think, right? We're trying to get to that mode of understanding of love, of bhakti.
Yeah.
And the gopis are our example for that.
Yeah.
If that would add any light or shed any light on the subject matter.
Thank you. So
thank you, Mother. And actually, you took that away from me because I was going to actually come from that angle, because when he was asking, I know this is a very topical question, but you know, they say that curiosity is the mother father of all desires.
Mm.
Curiosity is the mother father of all desires. Because when you're curious about something, it is not necessarily that it is bad. And just like we say, we came from the spiritual world. We cannot see the end because we're minute. We cannot see the beginning and the end of Krishna. So we want to see, curiosity, what is the other side of Krishna like? I want to see it. And Krishna allows us. So we come in here. And when we see it, we don't want to say, Krishna, I don't want to go to that place again. Because now we've seen it. So when the curiosity is there, it gives birth to desire. And once desire is intensified, and we know how that happens in chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, but on a day set aside, we'll go deep into this subject matter. It's a deep philosophical subject matter. I think.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much. Srimad Vara Prabhu, you have something to say? Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
You have postponed the debate, so let me just hang on.
Our host has postponed, so we cannot do it ourselves.
Yeah, it's kind of very detailed.
The deep subject matter.
Deep subject matter. So, and we've already gone past 2 hours. That's why I gave such a suggestion, but thank you. And we'll prepare a special poster for that, and we will humbly request as many devotees as possible to come and share their knowledge and their stance on the topic. I mean, to some of us who've been trying to read about these topics, everything everybody says, regardless of where they belong to, there is a counter scriptural reference. So it will be very interesting to see. Okay. All right. Hare Krishna. So at this point,
Haribo Acharya.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, we are all waiting for that day. But I guess Srila Prabhupada was also asked a similar question before.
Yes.
Same question. And Prabhupada used an analogy. Prabhupada said, if you are in a room and the room is on fire, what do? Do you run away? Do you run away, or you stay in the room and ask for the source of the fire?
Yeah.
So we are waiting for that day.
Okay. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, as those of us in the devotional service, we realize that we are in a room and the room is on fire, so we don't really care much about what caused the fire. But there are others who are not with us in the room. They are outside the room and they want to find out what caused the fire. So people want to find out, how did we get here in the first place? So we'll try to get into that next time. We're going to schedule a day for such a topic. At this point, we're going to ask all the devotees to humbly unmute, and then we chant the Hare Krishna to express appreciation for our speaker. Jai. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Panchakapataru Vyasya, Kripa Sindhu Vyacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo
Vaishnavata
Namaha.
Prabhu ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
His Grace Gangash Prasad Prabhu ki jai.
Salika Raj ki jai.